All right, welcome to Halitics. So glad to be with you today. It is Monday. It's an Arlen Monday. Hey, Arlen, how are you today?
Pretty good, Hal. It's a little cooler here. Definitely the temperature has dropped, but it's not raining and it's decent.
Well, one thing I was thinking, because I've asked you several times, when we do the program, I generally do open by asking you how you are, and you've often, recently at least, discussed the weather in Vermont. And I was thinking, I do that a lot too. I don't think 30 years ago, 40 years ago, when I was a young man, that I would respond to that question by describing the sky, right? I mean, I would maybe say, oh, I'm feeling good, or I'm this. But I think as we get older and we get creakier and our more joint aches and pains, we're like, let's talk about something that isn't, so personal. So, yeah, it's a nice day here. There's a little bit of rain in the forecast. So that's how it's going. But I miss Vermont. I used to go up there a lot. I never go. You're lucky to get that opportunity every year, Arlen.
Yeah, and like I said, I have a guest here. I told you anyway. I have a guest here from Redondo Beach, California. So that's a little different. We don't often have guests here because a lot of people say, "Oh yeah, we'll come up," but Robert here actually was willing to do it. So we'll show him a little bit of Vermont in the few days he's here, and that'll be different.
All right, that's exciting. And I'm sorry, Redondo is quite a distance, is it not? I'm sorry, we're seeming to have a little trouble getting, it looks fine. I think everything's fine for viewers, but for some reason I've had a little bit of some issues with my, my preview is poor here. I'm sorry about that. Well, you know what, Arlen? Maybe you and I will just talk because I can't see the screen very well. So the topic, or at least the question I pose, I try to pose questions for our viewers, is does he really suck more? Which I think is the perspective of pretty much everyone who, the few dozen people who watch Halitics, and certainly your view is yes, Trump is much worse. I push back on that all the time, but I'm going to try to be a little bit less aggressive in my questioning and rather give you your head, let you tell us why you don't think or you do think he is or isn't worse. Arlen, let's though do what we do first on this program is talk about the situation in Gaza, and it's really, really bad. So here we are. Okay, good. I got it back. I don't know what happened, Arlen. This is just so awful. We're not even talking yet about Lebanon, Hezbollah, but just what's been going on now for practically a year, the war on Gaza. And this, I think we become a little bit of nerd, but Arlen, attacks on schools, that's got to still feel really bad to read about. I don't know how you feel, but this really breaks my heart.
It's awful. There's no question about it. There's too many innocent people, too many civilians getting killed. And now what worries me is that this new kind of warfare, apparently, that Israel is doing against Hezbollah and, blowing up pagers and things like that. And if that becomes a thing, that way of war, that's going to be really tough for us because the United States is very vulnerable to things like that because we're so connected with the internet and electronics and so on. So I worry about that.
Right. Well, this is pictures more of like traditional old school warfare where you just drop, 1,000-pound bombs, 500-pound bombs. Apparently, we haven't been shipping the 1-ton bombs to Israel. At least that's what we're hearing. I don't know how true or untrue that is, but you can see from this image that the 500-pound bombs do plenty of damage. And there's a boy in the wreckage of the school we just heard about. This was on Saturday, and a lot of deadly attacks by Israel. This is from Democracy Now! So this is not the, an Arab news service. This is American media. And so just one attack over the weekend, Saturday, an Israeli attack in Gaza City killed 22 people, including 13 children. A 3-month-old baby, no safe places to go in Gaza. We'll talk about, the pager attack by Israel, but I got to ask you this. I mean, I told I'm going to be a kinder, gentler Hal today, but when I read this stuff, I'm like, I read this, I can't vote for Kamala. So tell me why, despite her statements repeatedly. There will be no change in policy. Remember, these bombs are our bombs. We supply Israel with the weapons that they're using to kill indiscriminately children, women, men. It doesn't matter. Why then, in your view, should we still vote for Kamala Harris for president?
Well, I don't know that if Trump was elected, anything would change. That he would probably allow Netanyahu carte blanche to do whatever he wants. But I feel bad for the Democrats and Kamala, because she's in a position where she doesn't want to contradict President Biden. That doesn't look good. She is vice president and all that. But at the same time, she's got to draw a distinction and, be a little bit stronger in her statements about, Israel needs to, do much better as far as not, killing all the civilians and, doing all the terrible things they've been doing. Well, all I'm saying is that, Israel is afraid of what Hamas would do, and that they would repeat what they did, just, going into Israel and killing lots of innocent people themselves. And so Israel wants to make sure that that doesn't happen. And so they want to destroy Hamas, but that's going to be really, really tough and almost impossible, because Hamas is, embedded so well inside Gaza, and they hide behind civilians. And, they're not doing a whole lot for peace either. I don't see Hamas being good for, any positive ways. And they're just as bad, and they don't want to stop fighting either, I don't think.
All right, comment here. I think Hal, I'm starting to think you are a Russian agent. I think that's a little unfair. I'm not sure I'm going to like that comment. Yeah, the point, though, again, I don't know what Hamas is supposed to do. I mean, Hamas, there's nothing, the UN, just like you said, Americans don't seem to care what Israel does. And the world hasn't done what it can to try to protect Palestinians either from having their land stolen. I guess we just look at it differently. I really can't see the Palestinian people as anything but victims of a terrible, oppressive, genocidal state. And that's been going on for a long time. I don't want to say back to 75 years, but certainly in the present day. And it's so horrific and so awful. But let's get to this. So we have no good means to defend ourselves from those kinds of attacks, Arlen. Wouldn't the best means be, and I'll push back on that statement too, but in terms of they're technological, or there's certainly, I think, political ways we can push back. But isn't another good mean to defend ourselves, Arlen, to stop defending Israel, to stop protecting Israel, to stop providing Israel with the weapons it's using to eradicate Palestine?
Well, I think that would be the best thing that the Biden administration and Kamala, if she gets in office, would be to, tell Netanyahu, you don't have carte blanche. We're going to, hold back some money. We're going to hold back some of the worst weapons, just so that they won't be able to be very, to offensively attack Gaza more. They could defend themselves, of course. You want to keep that, that ability, but they can't go as far as they have now, and they wouldn't be able to if the United States would keep a lid on all the stuff that we're giving them and making it possible for them to do this stuff.
Yeah, I just think that is the way we defend ourselves, is we stop being a force of evil in the world and we start trying to make things a little bit better. But let's talk about another possible way to defend ourselves. And remember, the topic here is, does Trump suck more, I guess, or does she suck less? Trump has a solution, I believe, to this problem that Harris has consistently mocked. And that solution is tariffs. The reason we have the risk, and the article is very, very clear, right? The pagers were sort of assembled in part in Taiwan, and then they were shipped to Hungary for finishing. And it was in Hungary that Israeli Mossad agents got into the plant, or they had people in the plant who were able to embed those plastic explosives. So this is the problem, and he's very, very clear. It's the international supply chain. But if we started imposing tariffs to the point where we were assembling, manufacturing, building these products, and certainly completing them, finishing them for our market here, it would be, I'm not saying it would be impossible, but it would be much, much more difficult, would it not, to make them dangerous?
Well, there's so many back and forths and so many ifs, ands, and buts about, tariffs. They're good in some things, they're bad in other things. I don't know if that's going to, lead to any kind of a peace, settlement in Gaza. I'm not sure that.
No, I'm not saying it would lead to a peace settlement. What I'm saying is, right, I mean, the way to have a peace settlement is we stop arming Israel. But I'm saying that if we want to secure, or at least when we purchase devices, we want to feel that they're relatively secure, that they haven't been exposed or haven't been in places where they're vulnerable. What I'm saying is that the tariffs would incentivize very powerfully, depending on the size of the tariff, domestic manufacturing and domestic assembly. So if the product isn't being shipped all over the world on jets, in containers, on ships, and being, and available, presumably, depending on how secure a country is, to terrorists, we would be much better off. And the way that would happen is if it's more expensive to produce or distribute goods made overseas, they would be made here and they would be safer.
Well, ideally, that's true. I don't know if it's realistic or because it would change a lot of ways that we do things in this country. But and it's a long range thing too. I would imagine that would take a lot of time. But we certainly have to figure out a way to defend ourselves from these kind of attacks or these kind of possible destruction in our own country based on all these. Phones and internet and everything like that, because we are totally dependent on that stuff. And, it's not a good, not a good thing to think about.
No, I'm with you. But again, I think this is why Hartman is so pro-tariff, right? And why I don't know what Trump's rationale is. I mean, I don't consider Trump to be a deep thinker, particularly intelligent or intellectual, but he has stumbled onto a very, very important, valuable tool that we can use to protect ourselves, to protect our economy, in my view, and one that Harris mocks. So if we're going to say she sucks less, I think we have to recognize that at least on that issue, she doesn't suck less. She actually is worse.
I don't think Trump is thinking about, tariffs and all that. He only mostly says, if I was in charge, the war would be over in one day, that kind of thing. He says that about everything, that he'll solve all problems, but he doesn't really have any answers.
Well, he's been explicit that tariffs are an answer. I mean, he's made that clear. He was on CNBC earlier this year. And, obviously the corporate media, the business own pro-business media is totally against tariffs because they would reduce the profits for multinational billion-dollar, trillion-dollar corporations at this point. So they're against it, and he's actually taking a position that goes against what a lot of the elites want and what they've argued is best. So he, that's something he's done that I think we should recognize, and it would make us safer.
I don't know if he's thinking of that, but
I don't know that he is. I agree with you there. I have no idea. I just intentions are of little moment to me at this point. I just care about what you do. And he did impose tariffs, not very thoughtfully, not very efficiently, but he did, and I think we should recognize that.
I think, I have no problem with that. I think we should certainly explore that and look at that and see if that'll help us, especially in this issue, making our own smartphones and cars and things like that. It's certainly worth looking into, because the way things are now, the multinational corporations pretty much get what they want, and they get cheap labor all over the world. And, there's a cost to that.
And we're also less safe, right? Because those products are exposed around the world to potential terrorists.
Yeah, unfortunately so. Israel is very clever, very smart. They know how to do these things, but other countries will, soon start doing the same things and, make the world that much more dangerous than it is now. And it's pretty dangerous right now.
By the way, I want to just respond to that comment. I'm thinking you are a Russian agent. I'm sort of tempted to give the Trump response as well. Hey, if they want to pay me money, I'll take it. But I won't say that. That's my temptation. But no, I'm not. Of course not. I guess he's being tongue in cheek in that. But this is. But I raise it because the concern, I think, it's not even a concern. On the left, if you take a position to the left of the Democratic Party, if you attack the Democratic Party from the left, you're really vulnerable. We've seen this over and over, whether it's people like Julian Assange. Obviously, I'm not in that category. Apparently, and I don't know if this is true, Tulsi Gabbard has claims now, and I believe her, I have no reason not to, that she's on some sort of terrorist watch list. She can't get on an airplane without being having to have like an hour of interrogation beforehand when she goes to the airport. We saw what happened to Assange. She was locked up for years and years because he took on the Democratic establishment. So it's, you put yourself at risk when you go after either party, when you go after the preferences of the billionaire class.
And of course, Al, they may be thinking, Russian agent, because you haven't been that strong on Ukraine about us.
Yeah,
making sure
that's right. I should be more. By the way, that's a good point. Speaking of Ukraine, I thought you'd be interested in this, Arlen. We'll leave the slides off for a sec. I was watching a football match, soccer, football in Europe match yesterday in downtown Washington, D.C. before I went to a peace conference. And at the match, I was sitting with a Polish gentleman, and we were talking for a while. He had a pretty, I thought, distinct English accent. And I asked him if he was English. It was an English soccer match. And he said no, he was Polish, but he was living in England. And he was, a fan of English football. So I asked him, I said, well, you're a Pole, and I know there's a lot of opposition to the Ukraine war and the support that NATO's offering Ukraine all the money. What is your take on that? So his first response was, well, I don't like Ukraine and I don't like Russia, and I think we should stay out of it. And then he went on to say, meaning NATO, right? He said there's a lot of money that Poland is a relatively poor country. There's homelessness, there's hunger, and we are sending millions of dollars from Poland is going as part of its NATO contribution is going to this war, which is prolonging it, which is making things worse. I said, well, are you worried about Russia going from Ukraine to Poland? He just said no. It didn't seem to be a concern of his at all. But he just felt that it was a bad thing, and he was against it. He did add that, I said, well, why don't you like Ukraine? And he said, because they're very anti-Pole. There's a lot of anti-Polish feeling in Ukraine. And he didn't say this, but I'm sure he was thinking it, and likewise in Russia. And we talked about how Ukraine supported the Nazis in World War II, and they were incredibly anti-Polish. Obviously, the Nazis destroyed Poland. So I thought you'd be interested to hear that.
Yeah, no, that's one person's point of view, but I think Europe definitely does not want Putin to take over Ukraine and be in a position where he can, take over more countries if he desired to do so. I think, Ukraine may not be perfect, but if they're in charge of their own country, especially with a, Jewish president, how Nazi, how fascist can they be? I think people would much rather have Ukraine be their own independent country than having Putin in charge of, that country.
All right. Well, I think that's not really, those aren't the two options, right? It's the two options aren't either Ukraine becomes part of the Russian Empire, returns to the Russian Empire, or it doesn't. I don't think those are the two options, but okay, I'll let you have that as a position. So anything else on Israel and those weapons that you want to focus on, because that was my main takeaway was it's those long supply chains, the international supply chains that make us vulnerable, and the way to get around that is to shorten them, just have the supply chain be in the United States. But did you have anything you wanted to add? Because maybe I missed something.
I just think that I'm worried that the war in the Middle East is going to spread any time now. If everybody keeps provoking, each country provokes each other, there's going to be a bigger and stronger war and more destructive war, and we certainly don't need that. That's something.
No, it's a terrible thing, and I don't. Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to push too hard the Jill Stein line, but I think it's kind of obvious in this case. So I showed this headline, but you brought it up when in response to what I said from the comment in the chat. But this was another story which I thought was very interesting too, that you promoted, Arlen. The MAGA movement has become a problem for Trump. So before I get my thoughts on that, or the slides that I chose, what was your response? What was your takeaway from this article, and why did it speak to you?
Because I think there is a reasonable chance that Trump could win this election and the MAGA movement would be taking over the country. And if they did so, they might be more inclined to put something like Project 2025 to work. A lot of people say, well, Trump will say, oh, I haven't read it, I don't know anything about it. But there's a lot of people on his side who, like all the things that are in Project 2025, and they're very disastrous, I think, and scary. And so that was what worries me. If they take over and put their people in, there's going to be a big change in this country, and it's not going to be good.
Well, I honestly haven't really taken Project 2025 very seriously. I probably should have taken it more seriously. I generally don't take platforms seriously, like the Democratic platform or Harris's platform. I don't really, I just look at what people do in the past, maybe what they say, but some sort of behind the scenes. People talk about the Hamas charter. Well, the Hamas is supposedly dedicated to destroy Israel, so that justifies Israel eradicating Gaza. I mean, I don't, that stuff. I feel like people can use those documents however they choose. All that said, I think this is fair. Look, the Project for a New American Century in 1999, Dick Cheney, Rumsfeld, those folks put that thing together, and they followed that blueprint, which was, we're going to destroy the Middle East to save it. So there are times when we should be scared of these documents. What in Project 2025, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but is there something in particular, Arlen, that you've read or that you've heard about that you think is especially dangerous for our country?
Well, I think what scares me the most is they're going to try and change the way, the people in this country, they'd like to get rid of the education department and the environmental department and all these kind of things and put in their people. And I think their people are very much ideologues. I mean, the Heritage Foundation is, that they're a big part of, helping Trump win and helping the conservatives win, and they're very much for this. And I think J.D. Vance did the foreword for a book by the leader of the Heritage Foundation who's pushing Project 2025, and they're not talking about it now, but I think once they become in charge, they're going to start instituting some of these things, and that's going to be scary. Let me see what else they're going to try to do.
Yeah.
I mean, they're going to try to change a lot of things and put the kind of people in that would be pretty scary, I think, for the country. So,
okay, I was wondering if there was anything in particular. I mean, certainly we've seen Trump's authoritarian nature came out. We could lose what few vestiges of democracy remain in this country if he becomes becomes president, and it is scary. There's no question about it.
Abortion, that's part of the Project 2025 too. I mean, these people are very much, like I say, they're ideologues. They're right-wing ideologues, and they're going to do whatever they can. And also, what worries me too is the retribution that Trump talks about. He'd like to, institute some retribution. So, he could go after, anybody in the Democratic Party that he doesn't like. And if he, is in charge of the Justice Department and all the other departments, then, there's that, and certainly the Supreme Court's not going to stop things from, getting worse. So, there's a lot of danger there, and it scares me.
Yeah, I don't say you're wrong. I think the bigger issue we should grapple with is it's both sides, right? It's both. We have to figure out a way to break free of a truly broken system, one that where both parties are vindictive, where both parties go after political enemies, where our freedoms are under attack, regardless of who's in the White House, and where in fact we're supporting genocide.
Well,
I think
both agree. We both agree.
I don't know how we change the Democratic Party if we keep voting for it.
Well, if you don't vote for it, you're going to get something worse, and then that's not going to help. But yeah, I think the Democratic Party has to really take a good look at themselves, because there's a lot of people in the country that are not happy with the Democrats, and the Democrats have to, stay focused on that and understand why that is. And I think the main reason is because, of course, it's big business, big corporations that really run this country. It's the ultra wealthy, the billionaires, who get most of what they want, and the average person does not. So,
well, if we keep voting for the billionaire coin, regardless of which side is facing up, aren't we going to keep getting worse and worse?
I wish I had a good idea, for that, Hal, and I hope somebody does somewhere. But
well, I've given it to you over and over and over. The good idea is turn your back on both parties. They're both destroying us. Well, it's not like if you're. It's sort of like you're saying, Hal. This is what I hear. Tell me what I'm wrong. Well, you quit cigarettes. You quit your 5-pack a day habit, but you keep drinking a quart of bourbon every night, or you stop drinking the bourbon, but you keep smoking the tobacco. I mean, I'm saying both. Let's move on to spinach juice every day.
Well, it'd be nice to have a party in there that's not going to be the same as the Republicans and Democrats, but that's not going to happen. They have too much power right now.
Well, but we vote. We get to decide. If we unite, isn't that what we need to do? Is unite together and demand something better, demand something that isn't evil. Why don't we do that?
That would be great. I don't know how it's going to happen.
Well, then join Halitics. Be part of the movement. I think that we see this over and over. Progressives, quote, unprogressive, quote, progressive, unquote, podcasters, writers, media, they all are in lockstep. We have to vote for the Democrat. We have to vote for the Democrat. Very, very few. You've said to me, Hal, you're unique. You're like on an island. I'm not on my own island. There are a few other people. There are other podcasters who have much bigger audiences than I do, but they're still small. People like Brianna Joy Gray do Dissidents. Jimmy Dore has a bigger audience, but he sometimes goes off into some stuff. I don't agree with the crypto stuff and things like that. But by and large, the Democratic apologists, the Kyle Kulinskis, the Crystal Balls, they have much bigger audiences even than the people I just mentioned, with, again, the one exception of the Pac-Mans, one exception, the Jimmy Dore exception. And then there are real super pro-Dems like the Pod Save America people, and they've got many millions of viewers. So you're not on my island all by myself, but pretty close. Why is that? Why do you think these institutions can't say, like Our Revolution, like progressive Democrats, this isn't working, we've got to do something else?
Well, I think most people in the country would agree with you, Hal, but unfortunately, as I've often said, it's our political system that is totally broken, and we have to, figure out a way to change it. One way would be to get money out of politics. We started to do that for a while. We talked about campaign finance reform, but now it's totally the other way. With the Supreme Court is allowing unlimited amounts of money to be spent by both parties. So people just want to hang on to their power. Democrats figure they're totally for themselves. Republicans totally for themselves. I don't have any good answer, Hal. But
well, I just, again, the only answer I can come up with is vote for somebody better. That's the only thing I can come up with.
Who would run the country? I mean,
the people that we vote for who are better.
But who would be behind them? Who would, yeah.
Well, it's true, but I certainly at this point have far more faith in Jill Stein doing what's right for our country than either Kamala or Trump.
But Jill Stein doesn't have a chance of being elected.
Because you say that. Because millions and millions of voters across the country are all saying she doesn't have a chance. She does. That's what people said about Bernie when he ran in 2016 and he almost won. And he didn't win. I mean, I get it. He did not win. But it's so tragic because he would have won that election. It wouldn't have been Trump if Bernie had won the Democratic nomination, which I think is also a very powerful indictment of the Democratic Party and its voters.
And I think you're also disregarding just how conservative this country is. I mean, there's a lot of, a good part of the country is very conservative. They wouldn't go for somebody like.
So then why did they vote for the black guy in 2008? If they're so conservative, why did they vote for the guy who said he wanted to make sure everyone had health care? He didn't do that, but he said it. Why did they vote? Did so many Democrats vote for Bernie? And why was he more popular than Trump in 2016? If Americans are so conservative, why did Kansas reject a bid to outlaw abortion in the Constitution? And why did Floridians vote for a $15 minimum wage?
Well, you're talking about individual issues, and that, that's a little different. When we talk about the whole movement, people are scared of anything that's different than what they've got now. So, there's still a very strong conservative movement. They're not going to, go away. And, like I say, if we could get the money out of politics, that would be the first start that I would hope for. And then we could get some, I think more of a democratic type country, small d.
All right, here's from that article, The MAGA Movement Has Become a Problem. So I think this goes to kind of what you were saying about him rejecting the consensus that we've had, putting his own people in, radicals. I mean, we saw a lot of that in 2016 with 2017, Trump's first year with John Bolton and kooks like that who got a lot of power. And here what the writer says, I guess Ezra Klein says that Trump pursued kind of a standard issue Republican agenda, despite the fact that he didn't really run as a traditional Republican. He pursued repeal of Obamacare, which wasn't popular at all, and he ultimately lost that. He pursued cutting corporate taxes, which, again, not a popular issue, but one that's very popular in the Republican Party, and he got that. He got very reckless, destructive tax cuts through. I don't really see where there's the fear that this will change. I mean, I can understand why, I assume you can too, why people want something different no matter what, even if it's something they don't really like and they are afraid of, and it's this radical right group that pushes Project 2025. I get that, the appeal for it, because life has become unbearable for so many Americans under the Republican Democratic control.
I think people understand that we've got a lot of problems that are not easily solvable, and things are getting worse in many areas. And that's one reason I think Trump has some appeal, because he wants to shake things up. But, one thing I pointed out an article to you that's in the New York Times where when Trump's first term, he tried to do a lot of things, but wasn't able to do it. He tried, but there were people who were going to, hold him back a little bit. People of a little people that are a little more establishment. But those people aren't going to be there anymore to be a guardrail against some of his crazy ideas and some of his crazy cronies. So, I think it'd be worse, much worse than it was his first term.
Well, I mean, I think, if you look at him becoming a tyrant, a dictator, that's really scary. I'm not saying that isn't possible. I think it is. Not likely, but it's not beyond the realm of possibility. What else? I mean, it's true. Things can get worse and worse. We could see the Supreme Court become even more extreme. For example, Obamacare, for all its manifest flaws, does provide people with some health care. We could see the entire country become a right-to-work country. So there's a lot of things that could become worse. But Arlen, we're already seeing our country get worse and worse. It's just kind of a question of how fast that happens. And again, as I've said before, there are some areas where I think Trump is better than Harris, certainly on tariffs and certainly on Russia, Ukraine.
Well, you just mentioned one thing, the Supreme Court. If Trump was president, he would be able to name more more conservative, ultra conservative Supreme Court judges. And that could, who knows what that would do? I mean, it can't get much worse, but it might. That's scary to me.
Are you watching Halitics? I trust me. I would be worried if Trump is reelected, but I will also be worried if Kamala is elected. I share your concerns about Trump. They are not, in my view. Maybe some of them are overstated. I think the argument that he has a political enemies list, while is true, I think it's also doesn't really reflect the reality that that's how politics works in this country right now. The Democrats have their enemies too, and they go after them very, very hard. So you've seen what AOC is doing to, for example, Jill Stein. You've seen now the attacks on the Teamsters by the Democratic Party, calling them traitors, and it's that kind of rhetoric. So I don't. I think what you're saying is kind of when we saw the Democratic Congress or Democrats in Congress go after Trump continuously, ceaselessly. So they have their enemies too. They go after people too. This is a system that needs to be changed, not rearranging the deck chairs on it.
Well, let me read a few sentences from that New York Times article, the top story on Sunday. In an Oval Office meeting, Mr. Trump told startled aides that if Attorney General Jeff Sessions would not order the department to go after Hillary Clinton and James B. Comey, the former FBI director, Mr. Trump would prosecute them himself. He would go after all the Bidens. He would go after anybody that he perceives as an enemy, even probably television networks and maybe your show. I mean, who knows? I mean, he would want to have total control because that's the kind of person that Trump is. And so,
no, I agree. I have the quote. I actually anticipated that one, Arlen, because you also did. You did recommend this. This is from, I think, the New York Times Magazine.
No, the front page of the New York Times.
That's the front page, because it looked to me like the magazine for some reason. That's an interesting cover, huh? Thought it was from the. Okay, well, no, I stand corrected. Yeah, I know. I got it. I mean, Trump, we agree. Trump's a bad guy. The question is, does that justify voting for another bad person, Kamala? Well, and I just can't say it does. I don't think it does in this case.
Be anywhere as bad as Donald Trump. I mean, she's pretty much, moderate. And
she's an unwavering supporter of a genocidal state, Arlen. She's an unwavering supporter. She will do nothing different. She will do nothing different.
You don't know that because she's not president.
I know that's what she said. I believe her when she tells me that.
Well, she's not going to say anything different right now. Like I say, she's got to kind of go along with Joe Biden and his policies, and she can't, rock the boat too much. Although she better start doing something, because right now she's not expanding her lead in the polls, and that worries me greatly.
That is true. We were going to talk about that. We can get to that. there's a lot of other topics. Did you have anything else you wanted to add to that piece about, because we can move on. I wanted to talk, if I get a moment, and I don't have to, the World Without War conference I attended, which was, again, I was one of the few people there, but there were a few little takeaways I would share that I think are relevant to this conversation. But let me put up this at least the headline or the picture. Yeah, I thought that's so interesting. The New York Times is doing stuff really interestingly. I often criticize the Times, and they're clearly an organ of the Democratic elites. But that said, they do give you a lot of news, a lot of information, and they do it very, very well. So, kudos to them. As much as I don't like the Times, often I think we're better off with them than without them. So there's the article. As President Trump demanded investigations of foes, he often got them. And that's, yeah, I mean, do you have more you wanted to throw in on top of that quote we showed earlier and you gave us?
And what worries me, as I've often said, all the right-wing networks, political sources, the Fox Newses and their copycats, they're pretty much, they're consumed by people only, and they miss a lot of the things that you might find in the New York Times or any other mainstream type media. They like what they hear about from Fox and Newsmax and all those other people. And there's a lot of money and strong support behind those kind of news sources, and that scares me.
Well, do you think that the media that you consume, CNN, I guess, I don't know, but certainly the New York Times, do you think maybe they're misleading too, that they're not providing you with the complete story, that some of the information you get there may be biased and is tendentious?
I can see bias, but I think the things you see on Fox News and other are really worse, because they kind of make up stuff. They promote lies. And I don't think that happens on the New York Times or MSNBC. I think
it does with MSNBC promoting the Russiagate story breathlessly over and over and over. The walls are closing in. That's something Rachel Maddow did every day for years, and that made it harder for Trump to govern, frankly.
There's definitely a bias on the left, on the progressive side, to MSNBC, maybe CNN. But I don't think they do the lies and promote the hate and the worst things that the right-wing media does. And right-wing media does not seem to believe in truth or reality, and that's the difference, I think.
Well, I think you're right. I'll give you this. I'll say it this way. The right-wing media is more obviously dishonest. Their lies are more blatant. The spin that the New York Times engages in is a little more subtle, and it's often sins of omission as opposed to sins of commission. It's the way they use language. It's the way they use active voice to describe what a killing by Hamas, and they use passive voice to describe what Israel's doing. So I think it's fair to point out that you're going to be misled more obviously by right-wing media, but I don't think we should discount the way the corporate left also misleads people, and how there's nothing presented in media beyond the two major parties. In other words, anything to the left, certainly of the Democrats, doesn't get any exposure in corporate media. No voices to the left of the Democrats. It's not true about to the right of the Republicans. You do have voices to the right of the Republicans because they're billionaires who are farther to the right of the Republicans, but there's really no billionaires who are to the left of the Democrats, and therefore you don't hear my voice is simply not elevated.
Yeah, but I think what scares me most about the right wing is all they care about is power. They don't care about truth or reality, and if it's no matter what it is, as long as it helps them gain power, that's all they care about. They want to just destroy own the libs, I guess, is what they're mostly interested in.
Well, don't you think, though, that's kind of your view, too, Arlen? To be fair, you just want to beat Trump, right? I mean, you hate Trump. You acknowledge you don't like Harris very much. You've recognized that her policies aren't good, but you just want to beat Trump and you want us to beat Putin. It seems like that's the same kind of, is there something different there?
Well, look who supports Trump, the kind of people that he hangs around with, the J.D. Vances, the super right-wing people, the Steve Bannons and all that, I don't think you find that in the Democratic Party so much. The Democratic Party tries to be, I think, more fair and polite and all that kind of thing. But I think
you got your Dick Cheneys, Arlen. You got your Dick Cheneys. I'll see your Steve Bannon and whoever was the other one and raise you a Dick and Liz Cheney.
Yeah, it's strange bedfellows sometimes. That's for sure.
All right. Yeah, so in terms, let me ask you this. Do you ever feel uncomfortable about the arguments that are being lodged against Trump, or do you feel like they're all fair in love and war? So this is a war to beat the Republicans, to own Trump, or he's fighting to own us, or what have you. So we can do anything we want. So I see this this meme, and I posted it. This is my take on it. But the Thanks Joe meme, because the U.S. is producing more oil than ever. And I view that as an extremely strong reason not to vote Democratic. I support a party that's pro-environment, and nothing could be worse for the environment than producing more oil. I guess maybe producing more coal, but they're pretty comparable. And of course, Harris is pro-fracking. So I guess, do you have a problem with that kind of an argument? Well,
yeah, because it would be so much worse with the Republican Party. They don't care about the environment at all. They don't even believe that there's global warming. So, again, it's the rich people, the billionaires, the big corporations that are going to control things. So if the Democrats, are kowtow to the oil companies now, the Republicans are only going to give them more. So I think it'd be a lot worse.
I don't know. It could be. How much worse could it be? I mean, I guess it's like you could be in you could be in a French prison, and then you're shipped to a Turkish one. Maybe there you go. That would be worse.
I don't think you recognize how bad the Trump administration would be if they got into power and what they would do to this country.
I guess I would flip that around and say I think you, Arlen, and so many Democratic voters really are insulated from just how awful the Democrats have been and how much harm they're doing.
I'm not, I know the Democratic Party has a lot to change, and they are far too, corporate dominated, because that's where the donations come from, so they could stay in power. So yeah, the Democratic Party does need to change. I certainly agree with you on that, and they've got their own problems, but it's just the other side would be so much worse.
On balance, I will admit, I will agree, on balance, I think Trump sucks even more than Harris. But I don't think it's nearly as great a difference as you do. And I think the issues that are used to separate Democratic and Republican voters are issues that ultimately don't impact negatively, regardless of how they're resolved, on the billionaire class. And if we want something better, we have to change the system. And I don't think there's any way you're going to change the system if you keep voting for either the Republican or the Democrat. Only when the party actually fears losing if it doesn't change, and actually not only fears, does lose and keeps losing, will it change. So
I think
that's the problem.
I think a third party would be, something that might be popular, but you'd have to get through the Democratic and Republican parties who control so much. But yeah, radical change is needed. I know that's what you'd like to see, but you're not going to get it voting for Jill Stein?
Well, I guess I would say probably not, but I know we're not going to get it voting for Kamala Harris.
Well, I'm hoping that she'll be a little bit different than some of the worst, Democratic presidents we've had in the past who've been kowtowing too much to the, big corporations. I'm hoping. That's all.
All right, Arlen, I'll let you have the last word, and that can be your last word. Or do you have something else you want to add to your last word, which is you're hoping Harris will be better?
Well, and I'd be interested what takeaway you may have gotten from your conference you went to, if you want to talk about that.
Oh, well, okay. Yeah, I had mentioned that, and then I kind of left it. I kind of dropped it. So I apologize for that, Arlen. You're absolutely right. I shouldn't have done that. That was poor hosting by me, not very organized. But let me just give you this is just a very quick slide. I'll talk much more about the conference tomorrow. There were very few people at the conference. I did speak to one gentleman. I spoke to a few people, the people who were there. I'm going to hopefully have two of them on this program as guests, because it is hard for me to talk to people that I just have such strong disagreements like you and Jack. Much as I love both of you guys and I have great respect for your intelligence and your knowledge, ultimately you come down on different sides often. So I do look forward to speaking to people who have more of a view that's similar to mine. And as you've pointed out, there aren't that many. But I was at this World Beyond War, and one of the major, sort of just one takeaway, there were a lot, but one takeaway, and I think this does go, Arlen, to why, among many reasons, I don't support Harris and won't vote for Harris. And just there's the calendar. So that's not really the relevancy, but was very much focused on American bases, American military bases, the enormous budget the Pentagon swallows up every year, and the costs of that budget. And I showed you the clip there, how we're bragging. Some Dems are bragging about how we have more oil than ever. Thanks, Joe. Like, that's something we should be proud of. One of the major reasons we consume, and I guess are now producing so much oil, is because the military swallows up so much, consumes so much fossil fuels. And here, this is actually an old clip, but as far as I can tell, it's still relevant. I don't think we have anything more recent. This is from 2019. And given that the military footprint has only expanded since then, I'm sure it's truer than ever. But here we go.
Study claims that the U.S. military produces more planet-warming greenhouse gas emissions than some countries. Brown University's Cost of War project says that the Pentagon, which oversees the Department of Defense, released 59 million metric tons of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases in 2017. Researchers say if the Pentagon were a country, it would rank as 55th largest greenhouse gas emitter in the world, ahead of Portugal and Sweden. China is the world's largest emitter of carbon dioxide, followed by the United States. Gilma Avalos for CBS Local News.
All right, so among so many other terrible things that our enormous bloated military does, is it is a major factor in the climate crisis, the climate catastrophe. And that made me think of what Harris said. Let's see, I hope this is the right clip. I believe it is, but I stupidly didn't caption it. But this is, since you asked me, that made me think of this clip.
To have a second child?
Oh no, that is not where I want to go. I'm sorry. That was her appearance on Oprah. The Oprah, yeah. There was a clip here where Harris, I guess I don't have it, so I won't waste a lot of time, but where she talks about how important it is to have the world's largest, most lethal military. And during the debate, she chides Trump for not being, in her view, staunch enough supporter of the military. When we see how much damage the military does, here we go. I do have it. I just didn't find it. I've got to do a better job here. Let's see if I can get it. Here we go. Here we go.
is about sustaining America's standing in the world and ensuring that we have the respect that we so rightly deserve, including respecting our military.
All right. And then she says, and making it the most lethal fighting force, which I'm annoyed that I don't have it. But people don't respect, and that was something that came out. They don't respect the military in other countries. They fear it. They're terrified of it. It's a force for harm and evil. And she is, again, touting this world destroyer. So I can't vote for that, Arlen. I just can't. I assume you can understand that, but maybe you can't.
Well, anybody that's going to be elected president of this country has to support the military. That's just the number one thing. We feel that we have to defend ourselves from, outside forces, and that's understandable. But there are certainly better ways of dealing with the military than we do now. There's just it's so big. And
Arlen, Bernie campaigned against bloated Pentagon budgets. He said we could cut back on how much money we're spending on Pentagon, and he got rapturous applause for that. Trump was the least hawkish Republican to run in 2016. He was always talking about how wasteful the Pentagon was, how we should cut back on our military budget. So I don't agree with you when you say that you can't win an election if you don't champion enormous bloated military budgets.
Well, look what you said about Bernie Sanders. He said something that wasn't pro-military, and he didn't become president. So that makes my case.
Well, yeah, but he had the entire force of the Democratic establishment and corporate media against him. And he still managed to go from single digits to almost 50% plus one in the Democratic primaries. And he probably would have been elected president if he had been the Democratic nominee.
That would be my preference, but it didn't happen.
No, it did not. All right. Anything else now in response? Because you asked me a question. I took that opportunity to take it and run with it. Any other thoughts?
No, that's good. I just wanted to hear about what that was, what you went to. And, it's funny, these organizations against war and all that, they used to be much bigger, in the older days, no more war and all this kind of thing. And you don't hear much of those kind of organizations anymore.
I think if Trump were elected, there'd be a little bit more movement because there is a Democratic anti-war left that has basically been neutered under Biden and Harris, just as that was under Obama. And I think, there are people who will go to anti-war rallies because they also view them as anti-Republican, but they won't go if they view them as anti-democratic. So I think that's one of the pluses, if you will, or the reason to consider electing a Republican isn't all bad, because at least it activates some members of the Democratic anti-war left. So that could happen. But you're right. I think people have given up. I think people have thrown up their hands just like they have with Israel and said, there's nothing I can do. Can't beat them. Can't beat the establishment. Can't beat the elites. So I'm going to just choose one team or the other and be on that team.
It does seem that way, doesn't it?
Arlen, we'll see you I will not be on next Monday. I'm taking off. Okay. So if you want to join me Tuesday, let me know. I don't know when you're moving back to or driving back. You're not really moving, relocating to the West Coast again. Keep me apprised of that. And I'll let folks know when we go forward what will be the status of Arlen next week. Finally, that'll be his decision. Finally, I will talk much more about the peace conference tomorrow. Thanks, Arlen.
Okay, very good. Take care. Thank you.